It was pouring, not just rain, but insult. He had no umbrella, no driver, and no name tag that screamed power, just a damp hoodie, a backpack, and a ride he had requested like any other person. But before he could even sit down, the auto driver snapped, "Get out! I don't drive people like you!" And just like that, slam. The door closed, the tires splashed, and he stood there, soaked in disbelief. What the driver didn't know was that the man he kicked out was the CEO of the rideshare company itself. This is a story about pride, perception, and payback. A man who built an empire from nothing and was mistaken for someone beneath dignity. You'll see how one careless act spirals into corporate consequences, and how grace sometimes walks silently until it's forced to speak. There's a little quiz at the end. How many times was the name Ethan Cole mentioned in this story? It's just for fun. It's our way of saying thanks for watching closely and spotting the subtle moments others might miss. Be the first to answer. Don't let someone else steal your spotlight. If you answer correctly within the first 7 days after this story is posted, your name might appear in our shoutout post. Even if you're watching late, go ahead and answer. We read every comment, and you might get a surprise shoutout anyway. Before we dive in, if this story moves you, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, hit like, subscribe now, and turn on the bell to keep the stories coming your way. The streets of downtown Chicago were slick with fresh rain. Umbrellas tilted against the wind, car horns echoed between glass towers, and the sidewalks shimmered under amber street lamps. Ethan Cole stood near the curb on West Ontario, trying to shield his laptop bag with his jacket. His usual car service had gone offline for system maintenance, a rare thing, so he'd ordered a regular auto pickup through the app his own company had developed. To the driver, he was just another tired guy in a hoodie. Maybe a college kid, maybe a delivery worker. Nothing about him screamed power or prestige. And the driver? He didn't care for quiet types who didn't tip in advance, or ones who looked like they had nowhere important to be. The moment Ethan Cole opened the car door, the driver turned back, scowled, and said, "Nah, not you. I'm canceling this one. Get someone else." "Sorry?" Ethan asked, blinking through the rain. The door slammed in his face. The car peeled off, spraying a puddle across his jeans. Soaked, humiliated, and heart-pounding, he stood still, not from anger, but from memory. Because once, not too long ago, he had been a delivery guy. And every day, drivers like that had treated him like he didn't belong. That's why he started the company. It wasn't about cars. It was about dignity. That night, Ethan Cole didn't report the driver immediately. He just walked home, sat down, took off his soaked socks, and thought hard. The next morning, he asked his assistant to pull the driver's ID from the system logs. Not to punish, not yet. He wanted context. What he found was a record of 35 complaints in 12 months. Rude behavior, discrimination, rejecting passengers on assumptions. Still, he didn't fire him. Instead, he scheduled a driver audit day, a secret one. The following Thursday, Ethan Cole requested that exact same driver, but this time from the company test profile, complete with live camera footage. The results? Identical behavior. The driver rolled up, scanned the test passenger, frowned, and drove off without a word. This time, the footage went straight to HR. But here's where the story turns. Instead of terminating him, Ethan Cole requested to meet the driver, face to face, in the conference room on the 11th floor, the same room where funding deals were sealed and quarterly numbers dissected. The auto driver walked in, confused. He saw the man sitting at the head of the table and paled. This is the guy. From the rain, he whispered. Ethan Cole didn't smile. He simply said, "Sit down." The man hesitated at the door, his fingers twitching near his jacket hem like they were considering retreat. But Ethan Cole didn't repeat himself. He just leaned forward, elbows on the polished oak, the silence pressing like weight. The driver obeyed. For a moment, all that filled the space was the low hum of the HVAC and the driver's uneven breathing. "You don't recognize me," Ethan said finally, his tone flat. I do now," the man said, rubbing his hands on his jeans. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it. It was raining. You didn't ask my destination. You didn't check the ride details. You just looked at me and decided I didn't belong." Ethan's voice never rose, but each word cut closer to the bone. "I've had a long week," the man muttered, eyes darting. "You wouldn't understand." "You think I've never had a long week?" Ethan Cole stood, slowly walking to the window that overlooked the city. "I built this company with my own hands. I know what long weeks feel like. What it feels like to be overlooked, underestimated." The driver flinched. "I didn't mean to offend anyone." "But you did, and not just me." Ethan turned back. 35 complaints. That's not an accident. That's a pattern. Now the driver's mask cracked, just a little. He folded his arms. "Yeah, well, maybe if people showed a little respect. They do until you don't." Silence again. Ethan sat. "What's your name?" "Luis." "How long have you driven for us?" "Almost 2 years." "And do you like it?" Luis looked away. "Pays the bills." Ethan studied him. He wasn't looking for remorse. He was looking for self-awareness, and finding none. "I used to do your job," Ethan said, "but I didn't spit on the very people I was supposed to serve. I didn't decide who was worthy based on hoodies or accents or if they smiled at me fast enough." Luis scoffed, too tired to pretend anymore. "You ever get screamed at because someone's latte was cold? Ever have a drunk throw up in your car and file a complaint against you? You think this job is some noble calling?" "Number. But I think every job is a mirror," Ethan said. "It shows you who you are. The pressure just reveals it." The room grew colder. Luis leaned back. "You gonna fire me or what?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he reached for a folder. Opened it. Inside were photos of Luis at various pickup points. Not surveillance, but stills from feedback videos and rideshare dash cams. One showed him arguing with a middle-aged woman. Another captured him rolling his eyes at an elderly passenger who had trouble climbing in. A third, his hand halfway raised toward a teen with earbuds in. "You think I don't know what stress looks like, Luis?" Ethan asked, voice low. "But this is disdain." Luis's jaw tightened. "They don't treat us like people either. They don't see your face. You do. You decide how the ride goes. Every single time." Neither man spoke. Then Ethan closed the folder gently and said, "Do you have a family?" Luis's expression faltered. "Yeah, a son. He's 12. "Then why are you burning every bridge you walk over?" Luis's voice was sharp now. "Because the bridges were already on fire. You think this job comes with respect? You think I feel like a person when someone dings me for not smiling? When I'm late because of traffic and they call me a failure?" Ethan let it sit. Because the resentment, was real. "You're not wrong," Ethan said quietly. "Our feedback system needs fixing. Our support lines are slow, and we're working on it. But what you're doing, it isn't survival. It's sabotage." Luis looked down. He didn't disagree. "So now what?" he asked. Ethan didn't answer right away. He slid the folder across the table. "Take it home. Look at every photo, every complaint. Ask yourself one thing. Would you want your son to act like this?" Luis didn't move. He stared at the folder like it might burn him. "I'll give you a week," Ethan said. "No driving, no pay, just think. And then? We'll talk." Luis scoffed, almost laughed. "You think I'm gonna come back in a week with some grand apology?" "I don't expect an apology," Ethan said. "I expect a decision. whether you want to be better or just bitter. Luis stood. I didn't ask for this lecture, man. Ethan didn't blink. But you earned it. Luis took the folder and walked out, not looking back. 3 days later. At the office, Ethan sat at his desk with untouched coffee and a headache that had lingered since Monday. HR had pushed back on his decision. Termination is cleaner, they said. You're setting a precedent. But he wasn't looking to punish. He was watching, testing, not just Luis, but himself. The truth was, he wasn't just mad at the driver. He was mad at how easy it was to go unnoticed, to be stripped of title, of image, and treated like nothing. It wasn't personal, but that's what made it worse. Later that week, Ethan Cole stopped by the operations floor, not something he often did anymore. He walked past rows of driver support agents, some who didn't even recognize him, until he paused by a cubicle where 2 junior analysts were whispering. "He's here! That's him!" He heard it, pretended not to. But it confirmed what he feared. His presence still caused discomfort, but his message didn't linger. He could fire Luis, or hundreds like him. But the core problem? It ran deeper than one angry man in a car. Friday afternoon, a knock on his office door. It wasn't Luis, it was Maya, the senior analyst from driver behavior audits. She carried a report. "You're not going to like this," she said, sitting. "What is it?" "Out of the last 100 complaints in our top cities, 63 were for attitude, not accidents, not navigation, not speed." Ethan leaned back. "So it's systemic." She nodded. "I think we need mandatory training," she said. "Like in-person, story-based, maybe even simulation." Ethan smiled slightly. "You just said everything the board doesn't want to hear." "Well," she shrugged, "I'm not on the board." But her words stuck with him. That evening, as the city glowed with rush hour and the sky teased rain again, Ethan stood by the tall windows of his corner office, and he thought about something Luis had said. "You think I feel like a person?" It echoed. Because the story wasn't really about Ethan being mistaken for a nobody. It was about what people become when no one sees them at all. The following Monday, Luis returned. Not early, not late, just on time. He didn't look angry anymore, just tired. He carried the folder, unopened. "I didn't look," he said flatly, placing it on the table. Ethan nodded once. "That's your choice." Luis shrugged. "Maybe I didn't want to see myself in those pictures." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe you already did." Luis didn't deny it. "Can I get my job back?" he asked after a long pause. "That depends," Ethan said. "Are you planning to keep treating the job like a punishment?" Luis didn't answer. "I'll make it easy," Ethan continued. "You can return, but not as a driver." Luis blinked. "Then what?" Ethan handed him a printout. "Training coordinator. Entry level. You'd be the one helping new drivers avoid your mistakes." Luis stared at the paper. "It pays less," Ethan added. Luis gave a hollow laugh. "Why offer this?" "Because angry people aren't born. They're made. And maybe your anger has value, if you learn how to teach from it, instead of pass it along." Luis folded the paper slowly. "You really think I can do that?" "I don't know," Ethan said honestly. "But I think it's the first honest question you've asked since we met." Luis looked up. "You trust me to fix others when I couldn't fix myself?" Ethan shook his head. "I trust you to decide which version of yourself walks into that training room." The tension between them didn't dissolve. There was no handshake, no forgiveness, just a quiet, unfinished understanding. As Luis walked out again, Ethan remained seated, eyes fixed on the empty chair he'd left behind. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if he wanted Luis to succeed or if he just needed him to try. The next morning, Ethan Cole didn't go to his executive meeting. Instead, he sat in the back of a small, windowless training room 3 floors down. The chairs were plastic. The air smelled faintly of coffee that had been left on warm too long, and the projector flickered as it booted up. Luis stood at the front, unsure, stiff, flipping through the orientation slides he hadn't even designed. His voice was low, not from humility, but from discomfort. "This job's hard," he muttered. "It's not just driving, it's dealing with people, fast, all kinds, and they don't always respect you." The 6 recruits in the room, all fresh faces with bright lanyards, exchanged nervous glances. Ethan watched. He didn't interrupt. He just observed as Luis stumbled his way through the basics: account setup, feedback management, emergency protocol, all of it delivered with the precision of someone who didn't believe in the words he was saying. At the 10-minute mark, Luis looked up and saw Ethan Cole watching from the back. Their eyes met. Luis flinched. He didn't stop, but he didn't improve either. After the session ended, the recruits shuffled out. Some smiled politely, some didn't. Luis stayed behind, closing the laptop too hard. "You spying on me now?" he asked, not turning around. Ethan stood. "I was hoping to see you connect." "Well," Luis shrugged, "hope's cheap." Ethan didn't take the bait. "How did it feel?" Luis snorted. "Like a joke. I don't belong in front of a classroom." "No," Ethan said, "but maybe you belong somewhere that forces you to listen instead of react." Luis turned. "What does that even mean?" "It means you're used to judging people fast. That job out there, it doesn't let you do that anymore." Luis shook his head. "You think 1 week off and a new title's gonna fix who I am?" Ethan took a step closer. "Number. But you're standing in a different room now. That means something. Or it means nothing." Luis stared at him. "What if I don't change?" Ethan didn't blink. "Then you walk out again. But next time, that door stays closed." That night, Ethan didn't go home. He stayed at the office, in the glass conference room where he could see the city shift from twilight to midnight. He was supposed to be preparing for the board retreat, a 2-day strategy session in Lake Geneva, but he couldn't focus. Because the problem wasn't just Luis. The problem was the story Luis represented. 3 years ago, Ethan Cole had promised his investors that his rideshare platform would be different, more human, more fair. He'd rolled out identity-blind hiring. He'd launched customer service protocols built on empathy scoring, not time to resolution. He'd even hired psychologists to consult on driver-passenger dynamics. But here he was, facing a driver who couldn't change, and a company that hadn't either. Maybe Luis wasn't failing, maybe Ethan was. The thought made him nauseous. The next day, Maya walked in with a new stat. "Driver satisfaction is down 6% since last quarter." Ethan rubbed his eyes. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because we started pushing efficiency again." Of course they had. New investors, new growth targets, new pressure. "You can't build dignity into the platform if the people behind the wheel feel disposable," she said. He looked at her, surprised. "You sound like me," he said. She nodded. "I learned it from you, back when you believed it." That silence, that was the worst kind. Later, Luis knocked on his door again. This time, he wasn't holding any paper. Just a look, half pride, half shame. "I'm not good at pretending," he said. "I'm not going to stand up there and give fake smiles." Ethan gestured to the chair. "Then don't." Luis sat, tense. "So what do you want?" "I want you to tell your story," Ethan said. "Truthfully, what this job really feels like, what breaks you, what gets under your skin, and what keeps you showing up anyway." Luis looked stunned. "You want me to talk about me?" "Yes," Ethan said, "but not to impress, to reveal." Luis leaned back. You're asking me to be vulnerable, in front of strangers. You're asking them to trust you, Ethan said. That's the cost. Luis scoffed. You ever done that? Put your real self on display? Ethan didn't answer right away. Then he said, every time I walk into a boardroom, I wonder how many of them would still shake my hand if they knew what my mother did for a living. Or how many eviction notices I collected before I got my first angel check. Luis blinked. That was new. I didn't grow up with suits and college visits, Ethan said. I grew up in borrowed kitchens and cheap motels, and every time I get in the back seat of one of our cars, I remember what it felt like to be the one holding the wheel and still feeling lost. Something shifted between them. But it wasn't enough, because Luis still shook his head. Words are good, but they don't change the ride. No, Ethan said softly, but maybe they change who drives it. 2 weeks later, Luis was still leading trainings, but now he opened every session with something else. My name's Luis, he'd say, and I used to hate this job. Then he'd pause, and sometimes I still do. He told them about his bad days, his pride, his quick temper. He told them about his son, and the time he missed his school play because a ride went long. He told them about the night he kicked out a man in the rain, thinking he was nobody. The rookies listened. Not all believed, but most understood. And Ethan Cole? He watched from the back again, this time not taking notes, just feeling. Then came the email from Luis. Subject line, need to talk. It was short, just a time and a room. Ethan arrived 5 minutes early. Luis was already inside, pacing. I can't keep doing this, he said, before Ethan could sit. I'm not the guy you want up there. Ethan frowned. Why? Because it's fake now. Luis shoved a sheet of feedback forms across the table. They like me, they smile, but I go home feeling like a fraud. Ethan picked up the sheets. Most had praise, a few suggestions, nothing harsh. They think I'm better, Luis said, but I still get angry. I still curse under my breath when someone's 5 minutes late. I still drive weekends just to pay rent. Ethan leaned forward. And I keep thinking, I'm no different. I'm just pretending longer. Ethan exhaled. Maybe that's what growth is. Not becoming someone new, just lasting longer before you snap. Luis looked down. I don't want to snap again. Ethan nodded. Then let's change what's snapping you. Luis looked up. What if we built something new? Ethan continued. Not just for training, for healing, for drivers who've seen too much and never had space to process it. Luis said nothing, but his silence was different this time. The next day, Ethan pitched it to the board. A mental wellness initiative, in-house counselors, story circles, crisis management training, peer mentors. They pushed back. Hard, too expensive, too progressive, too soft. Drivers need incentives, one executive said, not therapy. Ethan stood at the head of the room, hands clenched, and he told them a story about a man who kicked him out in the rain, and how he gave that man a second chance, not because he deserved it, but because they all needed to see what happened when someone tried to be better. The room didn't clap, but they didn't vote it down either. Run a pilot, the CFO finally said. 6 months. It wasn't a win, but it wasn't a wall either. That night, Ethan sat alone in the employee cafe. Lights dimmed, rain tapping the glass again. He sipped tea, not coffee, and thought about compromise. How we all live in the spaces between who we are and who we wish we could be. And how sometimes the road to something good doesn't start with a handshake. It starts with standing still. Just then, his phone buzzed. A message from Luis. I'm not healed, but I'm still here. Thought you should know. Ethan stared at the screen, then replied, Same. And finally, for the first time since that rainy night, he smiled. Sometimes it's not the storm that tests us. It's what we do after we've been drenched, humiliated, and seen by someone who knows exactly what we're capable of, and chooses not to walk away. Ethan Cole gave a second chance to the very man who reminded him what it felt like to be invisible. And Luis? He stood in front of strangers, exposing the parts of himself he was least proud of. Not because he was ready, but because pretending hadn't worked. There was no forgiveness sealed with applause, no perfect moment of transformation, just the quiet space between two people, choosing not to quit. Because maybe growth doesn't happen in clean, heroic arcs. Maybe it shows up in messy, uncomfortable conversations that never reach full agreement. And maybe the most powerful stories are the ones where no one wins, but everyone tries. And remember, there's a quiz at the end. Be the first to answer. Don't let someone else steal your spotlight. Drop your answer in the comments below. If you answer correctly within the first 7 days, your name might show up in our shoutout post. Even if you're watching late, don't worry. Comment anyway. We read every single one and sometimes surprise loyal viewers with bonus shoutouts. While you're here, tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories too. Like this story? Smash that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe now and turn on the bell so we can keep sharing stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay kind, stay curious, and remember, every ride tells a story. Quiz. How many times was the name Ethan Cole mentioned in this story?